welcome to the Going Beyond podcast. I'm Randy Zinn. I'm an entrepreneur, wellness expert, author, and the founder of the Going Beyond movement. I'm constantly exploring how individuals can make the most impact on a daily basis. And here's what I've learned. Your life is part of the change we want to see in the world. Your life is the movement. The work you do is that drop that causes that ripple effect of positivity. Let today's episode be part of your daily contribution toward change, the investment you make in yourself. Let it be the fuel you need to go beyond. Are you an entrepreneur, change maker, or looking to build or shift your brand in these wild and unpredictable times? The Going Beyond podcast is hosting our next virtual event on Sunday, October 11th at 7 p.m. to 9 p.m., and you won't want to miss it. Going Beyond Your Brand as You Know It is a virtual event that is focusing on the conversation that needs to be had. How are women facing the need to pivot their brands, their workflow, and their time spent cultivating their personal growth during a time of so much unknown? In celebration of the newly launched Going Beyond movement brand and website, we're creating a space for female talents and their voices and diving into how we can contribute to the change the world needs during this intense time in history. We want to open up, get real, and unearth best practices with women touching a variety of communities, products, and platforms. We welcome wholesome growth strategist and author Naisha Williams, founder of Hustle Like a Mom, Pamela Peckerman, co-founder of The Scribes, Pooja Patel, and co-founder and CEO of Free the Mind, Kim Norman Dobrin. Each ticket is $20, and all profits from the event go to Girls, Inc., a nonprofit that focuses on the development of the whole girl. The combination of long-lasting mentorship relationships, a pro-girl environment, and research-based programming equips girls to navigate gender, economic, and social barriers and grow up healthy, educated, and independent. We cannot wait to support them. A big thank you to our sponsor, The Scribes. The Scribes have two simple goals. They design high-quality journals and support worthy causes. We can't wait for you to get to know this brand at this event. And with me, you can use promo code GOINGBEYOND, one word, to get 20% off, and a portion of the proceeds will go to Girls, Inc. Sign up for the event at goingbeyondmovement.com. See you there. Hi, welcome to today's episode. I'm thrilled that you're here. I know today's conversation is going to be so enriching and so interesting because so many of us are really doing our best to manage a very difficult and confusing period of time, as well as to do the absolute best that we can with our health, our wellness, mind, and body. And today I have a very special guest who really is an expert in stepping into the world of shaping health and wellness on the corporate level, which means she's paying attention to both the individual and the larger picture. And she's been doing this a very long time. So I'm going to introduce my guest today. Her name is Julie Wald. We were introduced actually by my cousin, which is, I love that. I love when the world brings me together with somebody wonderful. So Julie is a wellness practitioner for over 25 years. She's the founder, CEO, and chief wellness officer at Namaste Wellness, a leading corporate wellness company. Julie is also the best-selling author of Inner Wealth, How Wellness Heals, Nurtures, and Optimizes Ultra-Successful People, released in March of 2020. Well, that month is a very relevant month for all of us. Julie holds a master's degree in clinical social work from NYU, and she began her career in 1995, treating adults, children, and adolescents in mental health and healthcare settings. In the process of building her impressive mental health practice, Julie also pursued her personal wellness objectives by becoming a yoga instructor, a meditation teacher, a Thai Bodyworker, and a Reiki Master, all of which I want right now. So one of the things that I love so much about what Julie has created, and we're going to talk more about today, is that Namaste Wellness was really conceived in the wake of the attacks of September 11th in 2001. And I think that we can really reflect on that when we're learning today, because so many of us are in a time of creativity and innovation and pivoting based on a very difficult and tragic period of time, which for those of us who lived through the 9/11 attacks, myself included, in New York specifically, we know what that period felt like, and there is a link to this period of time now. So, I know that Julie has just done so many interesting things in this period of time during COVID, but she has a wealth of knowledge that she can share with us today about how we can continue to do this pivoting, this learning, and this attention to our health and wellness in a really meaningful way. So, Julie, I'm really happy you're here with me today. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's my pleasure.
So why don't we, I just obviously read your bio so people have a sense of you, but maybe take us back to that period of time right after 9/11 where you had that pull to create something that was in response to such a difficult period.
Absolutely. So at the time, I was working as a social worker. That was my full-time job. I was working in a mental health setting with adolescents and adults and even some children. And I had a side hustle, which was teaching yoga and meditation. And I would literally leave my apartment at 5:15 a.m. and I would squeeze in a couple of private sessions before my social work job, and I would hop on the train and head up to the Bronx and go to my social work job, and then I'd come back down to Manhattan and see a couple more private clients after my day job in that yoga and meditation realm. And when 9/11 hit, the private clients that I was seeing at the time were leaders. They were CEOs, they were executives, they were primarily in the financial space, but also in some other industries. And across the board, they started telling me, we're worried. We're worried about our companies. We're worried about our employees. The 9/11 was traumatic. It also created just a huge amount of grief for people, similar themes to what we're seeing now, although obviously on a global scale. And so I remember coming home one day. I was living in a studio apartment on the Upper West Side. And I remember coming home to my husband and saying, companies need us, employees need us, these organizations need us. I'm hearing from these decision makers, from these C-level executives that they're concerned. And if they're concerned, then, we need to figure out how to help them. And part of my conversation with these people was, and can you come to my company to help? And so that's when my husband, Michael, and I sort of put our heads together and said, this is a business. New York needs us. New York needs to heal. And we came up with this name, Namaste New York, which was our name for many, many years until we sort of shifted to really operate on more of a global scale, quite frankly. But at the time, the original intention was all about, so the word namaste means the light in me sees and honors the light in you. And it was really about that. It was really about honoring that in New York and helping New York heal from this tragedy, and started our business based on that intention.
I love that. So what did you do first? I mean, did you yourself get out there and start doing the work in the companies? Did you bring like a team of other practitioners?
Started hiring practitioners. So I slowly kind of weaned down from my full-time social work job as our business started to ramp. I went to part-time and so on and so forth. But I was really busy, between teaching and my clinical work. And so we started hiring really incredible wellness professionals around Greater New York. And so that was always just an amazing part of our business, was finding really talented people and then bringing them to these settings where people were so hungry for the skills and the knowledge. And going back to this time, wellness was not as mainstream. It was not as trendy at all. It was really something that people who were more seekers or considered themselves spiritual in some way would move towards. And when we brought this into the corporate setting, it was just such a powerful moment for these people for these employees, I should say, who wouldn't necessarily go seeking this out, but it suddenly started to build up these incredible tools. And really what that looked like at the beginning was consistent classes, breathing classes, meditation classes, yoga classes done, in a conference room or, in any sort of open space that we could find. And we paired that with lectures and talks and what's now evolved into master classes and webinars, but really the educational component of the why. Why are we doing this? Why is doing yoga and learning to breathe, and why are these practices useful?
And what did you see? Because I've done a mixture of going into companies too and doing talks and workshops. And sometimes you walk in and you feel like people are unsure if they want to be there, if they want to go there. But I'm imagining at that time, going back in my own memory, we were so vulnerable. We were so open. And even just how people interacted with each other. Like I remember New York being so just brotherly to one another after that period of time. So I'm almost imagining you were met like with a lot of receptivity.
Yeah, the receptivity is definitely connected to the pain point. Just interestingly, prior to COVID, 19% of adults reported poor mental health. This is from a Kaiser Family Foundation study that was done in July. And 39% in May 2020 of adults reported poor mental health. So from 19% to 39% pre-COVID to May. And then in July, 53% of adults reported poor mental health. So the pain point is high now and it's growing, similar to when 9/11 occurred. And there was just this really big pain point and a lot of receptivity around what we were doing. And so, I think it's really interesting to understand that correlation, and it's a really relevant piece of information.
It sure is. The big difference being right after 9/11, you could make that physical connection with people in a different way. Yeah, we can do a little bit right now outdoors and such, but now on one hand, you can't connect with people in a big office building, in a conference room. That's done. On the other hand, there is also opportunity with a variety of ways that you can connect with people. So what's the landscape now? And we could almost argue that the need is even more than it was post 9/11.
Oh, it's definitely more. Actually, 50% of employees are uncomfortable even discussing mental health issues. So, when you think about, it's like the numbers are huge based on what people are reporting, but then you have to figure that so many people aren't even talking about how much pain they're in, which is another, concern. So how do we address that now in this sort of new normal, so to speak? Well, basically, obviously, everything is virtual. That's for starters. So one of the cool things is that when we've done feet on the ground programming on site for all of these years, we've, number one, it's more expensive. Number two, it's harder to meet and connect with the same number of people, meaning that, many of the places that we work with have offices all over the country. And so, thinking about the fact that face-to-face piece is missing, but there's a lot more opportunity for connection with a larger group of people, which has been really cool. And really what we know is that people learn and internalize information in different ways. And so it might look like master classes and webinars and really that educational component to why wellness, how do I support my mental health? How do I support my stress? What are ways that, what are integrative, research-driven ways that might be helpful to me right now, given these unprecedented, time that we're in. So education comes first, and then after that comes practice. And that's really the classes. And yes, there are many resources available to people for fitness classes and yoga classes and meditation classes, but there's not a lot of resources available to people for really connecting with community, with their colleagues, and feeling like, all of those moments and relationships that were built over, lunches and different aspects of being at work are gone. And so creating that sense of community by bringing people together to practice self-care is sort of the second component of a program. So it's education, it's practice. And then the third component is, and many companies are doing this, is one-on-one support, because, if employees are very important asset to a company, and if employee is depressed or anxious or not, and therefore unable to be productive or efficient or make good decisions or have, positive customer interactions, those things are a problem for a company. And so in some cases, companies are calling us in to do one-on-one coaching, where we bring our team of wellness coaches who have a clinical background like me in social work, but are also wellness experts, and help to support employees figure out, what is my formula right now, recognizing that could change and evolve as things are moving quickly. But everybody's circumstances are very, very nuanced. And so sometimes that one-on-one coaching piece is important. So to summarize it, it's education, practice, and support.
I love it. It makes me happy, honestly, to hear that there are companies out there that are investing in this way, because the stakes are so high right now. There's absolutely nothing we've seen to look back and say, oh, this is what it means, function as an employee or as a creator or as a family member under circumstances like this. So for a company to be wise enough to provide tools like this to their teams, that gives me a sense of hope.
Yeah, I think so. Necessity is the mother of invention. And I think that they're really recognizing that the investment that they make in supporting their employees mentally and physically right now is absolutely going to pay off in terms of their bottom line, not to mention the fact that it's the right thing to do. But, it's definitely starting to happen. And it's, and I think given sort of people keep using this unprecedented word, I think the fact that the stressors that people under are so new and unprecedented, it's literally like a different world than it was, this time last year. I think that companies have had to rethink how they're allocating budget and, everything, because the world is different. We're on different turf at the moment. And so what perhaps previously may have seemed, like too much or not necessary, now has become absolutely 100% necessary.
Right. Or, it's interesting. I've been thinking about how the necessity to cut and pivot, depending on who you're talking to, was either a blessing or a curse, right? I mean, some entrepreneurs or some, people in business, they were kind of right on the edge of knowing certain things had to change. And this period of time gave that permission or that excuse or that motivation to just totally shift gears. And I think people are actually finding more growth and more success from that angle. However, the other side of that is, to your point, when you have to change and you have to look through a new lens that we've never had to look through before and think about your business and your teams in totally other ways, at the end of the day, you do have to support the human beings involved. And I think that that's where your work is so crucial. It's like, if you don't have these intact human beings, we're all sitting in our own, home offices or whatever spaces we're trying to be productive with. Like, how in the world, how in the world can we manage all of this? So we do need to make sure we are intact, mind and body in some way. One thing that I've run against with, even people wanting to be a part of some things that I'm doing is that people are like, I'm zoomed out. That's like the new verb. I'm zoomed out. And so I think we all have to both admit when we're zoomed out, but at the same time understand that we do have to connect this way to get what we need sometimes.
100%. In fact, you'll love this, in thinking of sort of solutions outside the box and this concept of sort of how reliant we've been on Zoom. We had a number of companies over quarantine in the spring put together a series of classes for their employees' children because they wanted to keep the children busy on Zoom so the parents could get their work done. And so one company hired us to come in, and we had yoga classes and mindfulness classes and fitness classes and dance classes all set up for kids in the afternoon of their employers. This was a huge company and that did this very robust program geared towards kids, and a number of others, really wanted us to do similar types of programming. But I think, number one, that's sort of obviously unprecedented. Your company would never provide you services for your kids in the past. But I think that speaks to that kind of concern about the human being and the fact that these boundaries between, the digital age put one massive dent in the boundary between our work life and our home life, just because we could be constantly connected. And so that was number one. But this next level of working from home for people who, for companies where that was not the culture, and for families who aren't really set up for that, has just, put this other huge spin on kind of the separation between work and family. And then on top of that, obviously school schedules and lack of childcare and all the other challenges that parents are facing, have forced companies to really look at the human being and have to take into consideration, the whole employee, which at this point includes their kids, their workspace, their home, like so many variables. And it's it's overwhelming for employers. HR directors have a lot on their plates right now.
Oh, yeah. And I'm assuming that's who you're most directly communicating with based on, yeah. I mean, I'm resonating with everything that you're saying. I mean, March through June was like absolute insanity. My husband and I don't work for anyone else. We work for ourselves, but making things flow in this house and getting our work done and keeping our kids sane and keeping our house clean and food made and all those things. I mean, it was heavy lifting and we all did it. And that's the good news. We all know the same story in so many ways. But yeah, I will say that I think half the battle is recognizing that you must carve out that space for your self-care, mind and body. And when you work for someone else, you want to feel that that is taken into account. And I think that that's the really inspiring part of what you do and the knowledge you have of what some companies are actually doing for their employees.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. One last little story I'll share on kind of sort of the problem, so to speak, the stress situation and this mental health situation is I was on the phone with this customer service person the other day, and I was calling just with a small issue that I had to resolve, and I was being very nice, and I heard a crying baby in the background. And I said to the woman on the phone, I said, "Oh, it sounds like you have your hands full." And the minute I said that, this poor woman burst into tears.
Somehow,
now, I won't.
Social worker.
But I know. I was like thinking, okay, you landed on the phone this happened with the right person. But I'm not going to name the name of the company, which is a really big company. And, I don't know that they would be so thrilled to know that their customer service person was bawling their eyes out on their phone with me and I was counseling them. I mean, that's not how you want customers to be interacting. And so, I think that's just I love that story because I think it just shows sort of this tipping point that we're at. And then to bridge that to what you just mentioned around kind of the need for practices, the need for self-care and the importance of self-care. I think one of the most important ideas is that small things can make a really big difference. And that when parents are juggling a lot and, there's seemingly very little time in the day to no time in the day, what are things that you can integrate that take almost no time that could be really powerful and consistently supportive. And one of the things that we work with all of our clients around understanding is what we call the 4 pillars of wellness, which is really a framework for self-care. So, and this is much of what my book talks about, it's really the fundamental ingredients that a newborn baby needs to thrive: movement, stillness, connection, and nourishment. Movement, stillness, connection, and nourishment. A baby, anybody who's a mom, those are the ingredients that a baby needs. If the baby has all those ingredients, chances are they're going to be just fine. If one of those ingredients is missing, then something is out of whack. And if more than one of those ingredients is missing, then more things become out of whack. So, for very clinical term there. But the idea, and I say this because we need this as adults, we need this as parents, we need this as employees, and our children need these 4 pillars too. When there's so much that we don't have control over. What can we check a box each and every day for movement, stillness, connection, and nourishment, even if it's like 1 minute of something, even if it's just something as simple as remembering to take a deep breath. But if we can sort of make sure that those basic ingredients play some role in our day and our children's day, we're moving in the right direction.
I love the simplicity of that. And it resonates so much for me. I feel like this is a lot of the things I've talked about as well. And I think we all need to remember that. I think we need to remember, and I think if you communicate with other women in particular who are doing this juggle right now, and you ask them, what made the big difference in your day, they would say the little walk that I took by myself, or the delicious salad I made myself for lunch, or the fact that I got to meditate for 5 minutes. To your point, it's like if you're hitting those pillars, you're going to feel the benefit reverberate through your day, and it affects everyone and everything. So I am totally in line with that.
Yeah, there's a concept around this idea of like keystone habits, how specific habits, something like a morning walk, the ripple effect on almost every aspect of your day, including your interactions with your spouse, your kids, your, colleagues, your creativity, everything is impacted. And I think that really small things, when they're done with some level of consistency, and we talk a lot about how, what you need to do in order to form a habit and the necessary kind of ingredients in terms of making things more unconscious, because willpower is hard for people, even though it's so simple. Something as simple as, taking the time to make a salad as opposed to just grabbing something when people are stressed is harder. And so, teaching people about what research tells us in terms of how we create behavior change, how we form new behaviors, how we create new habits, which is basically a lot of repetition, about 66 days worth daily. But the second thing is recognizing that because of the time that we're in this day and age, habits have to be malleable too, even though we want them to be really consistent. Like we need to, in a couple weeks, supposedly my kids are all going back to school, the schedules, they're all in hybrid models, whatever it looks like, it's crazy. My schedule, my habits, the things that I've been doing this summer are going to need to change. And that's where we bridge kind of beyond habits to what we call like practices. Practices, if you have a movement practice, it's malleable. It's just a part of your life, and you figure out how to make it happen consistently. If you have a stillness practice, same thing. And so we need habits. Habits are really important because they enable us to do more, because we rely on willpower less, because willpower is tough, especially in the face of stress. However, those habits need to be based in practices that are fundamental and will be resilient through the changes that we're going through right now.
I totally resonate with that. And just getting a little personal, I think I have successfully, thank God, done that, mostly because my wellness practices over the course of decades at this point are so a part of my life that they go with me depending on what's going on. So a couple of my pivots I've made, kind of to your point, with the right people, the people that it doesn't matter, I don't have to be totally still. I've hacked some of my workouts in with my phone calls. So if I'm on the phone with the person that works most closely with me, she knows I'm always trying to fit in my movement. So I'll be on the treadmill walking while we're talking. And similarly, I realized in this period of time that I was doing everything from home, that I was kind of losing it mentally. Like I was hitting a wall. I had just seen the same things over and over again. And at the very beginning of the summer, I created a new practice. For those of you who've been hanging out with me online or on social, because I post pictures all the time of it. I've made Fridays my hiking day. And I get out into nature and I hike, and I usually hike with a girlfriend. So it becomes this movement and connection, to your pillar point. And I didn't usually take Fridays to do something like that. But what I'm willing to work longer or harder in the days lead up, so I know I have that. So to your point, that flexibility is key. And yeah, I admit I'm a little stressed thinking about the fall and how am I going to fit in all of these parts of my life that are important to me, let alone work, with all of this hybridness going on with my kid's life. But this is where I think we have to trust in our practices if we have them and in our intuition for them so that we know it will come. It will show itself where it should be. If we don't have those practices really lined up and really clear, I think it's a very important space to touch and to challenge. Like, where can I begin to find less anxiety around this and a little bit more of an experimental approach? Because the anxiety or the stress around it can almost cancel out the good effects of what will happen if we can touch it.
Totally agree, 100%.
Yeah. You know what? We're in like a very positive flow right now with this conversation in terms of, what's important and all of these things. But I don't want to miss on the important point that there is a lot of struggle right now. Like, I think it's very easy for human beings, regardless of what we see in the media or what we know to be true on a global scale. We're still individuals in our homes, in our worlds, with our unique struggles. And I think it's still, even though we, know we're not alone, to feel we're alone. And we all are subject to that at one point or another. And we've all been through struggles in this time, losses or grief, even if it's not ultimately connected to COVID. Everything has a deeper weight right now. And I think we can all relate to what that means. And so I do want to really normalize the degree in which we are all feeling multiple stressors and that we are feeling such a degree of worry and discomfort, and that you really truly are not alone in that experience with yourself. So I know, Julie, because you're responding to the needs of so many different people in different places, I thought maybe you could outline for us sort of the most relevant, as you said, pain points right now for people so that people listening can understand, like, you're not alone. We are all really journeying this together, and we're talking about how to manage it and how to come out of this hole, but it's real.
Yeah. I think really this concept of, and you touched on it, of ambiguous grief. Ambiguous grief is like the grief of something you can't put your finger on. It's the loss of something. It's like the loss of a way of life. It's the loss of a mentality. And I think that regardless of where you are, whether you're, I think globally there's a sense of ambiguous grief of the world is different now than it was before COVID, and in so many ways. And, everybody, while some people are dealing with much more acute situations than others, there's this universal sense of loss of, oh, wow, this is different. And whether you're worried about, your children and how they're going to fare with remote schooling, or whether you're worried about putting food on the table, chances are it's different now than it was before COVID because everything has been impacted. So I think that this sort of global sense of ambiguous grief is this thread that's kind of tying us all together right now. And, nobody really knows what the future is going to look like. And in that uncertainty, we're also really bonded.
Absolutely. And yeah, I always say we're energetic beings. We feel things that we might not even understand specifically what it's connected to, but when you're talking about global suffering and you're talking about global worry on a political and a leadership level, when you're talking about racial and social injustices and violence, you can be sure that it's in yourself. It's there.
Totally. 100%. And even just in our little communities and, I think about the people I know, and, one of my friends had cancer and recently finished chemo, and she's got a kid going back into school right now, and she's petrified because her immune system is compromised. Another friend just, lost her job, basically. I mean, they cut her salary down to almost nothing. And she's the primary breadwinner of their family. And so she's got, financial stresses. And I think the point is that if you ask 10 people, like everybody's got their own worries. And, some people, at this exact moment may not be, or I should say, maybe able to connect more with the silver linings. And that's okay too. I think that's a really important piece of this, is that it's like one of the most powerful coping strategies is to figure out kind of what are the positives and how can I look at this and what does this challenge mean in terms of how I need to innovate myself or my career path, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But, it's not easy.
No, it's not. And back to the whole point of this conversation, we have to nurture ourselves to have access to that information. The silver lining doesn't just come because you want it to. When things are hard, they are hard. But when you do spend time tapping into the body that we've been blessed to have, when you tap into the power of our mind and our breath, we're somehow able to see something differently. That's the beauty of those practices. And when I would say a silver lining for most people I speak to is that we do have immense gratitude for the more simple things because we have had to slow down. We are not running at the speed we were running. We're in more simple environments. We're not traveling the globe. We are focusing on keeping a steady sense of groundedness as a unit, whether we're individuals or our families or our teams or what have you. And so I think the silver lining for many people has been that return to simplicity and that, return to something that is actually more human and more sustainable. It's been very hard. And I admit that there is a piece of the prior life, if we're referring to it pre-COVID, that I don't actually want to go back to. As much as I am in total grief for my prior life, trust me, I am. I miss many, many, many things. And I'm very anxious about the future, just like everyone. There is a pace and a level of anxiety that I existed in that I don't want to see again. And I wonder if I will, or I wonder if something has sifted its way out.
I think it's the latter. I agree with you totally. And I don't think we'll ever go back to where we were. I don't think we'll stay here. I think it will look like something new that comes as a result of sort of the accumulation of these different chapters. But one of the other things I thought of when you were talking was this idea of, the fact that with so much out of control, we do need to figure out as humans sort of what to take control over what we do have control over in the face of this grief, in the face of, some of the challenges that people are dealing with. One, of course, is this perspective, right? And sort of thinking about the things that are, maybe shifted and evolved for the better. But another is really thinking about these 4 pillars of movement, stillness, connection, and nourishment. And I tell this a lot to parents who are worried, is my kid having too much screen time? And, they're worried about the lack of social interaction, this and that. And we talk about, as long as your kid is moving every day, is getting enough sleep every day, is eating at least relatively healthy every single day, and is connecting to somebody, even if it's, a friend over a video game or something like that, then you're in business, then you're taking control over what you have control over. And I think it goes for us as adults as well, is that when things are really feeling out of control, we need to grab what we have control over. The other thing I want to mention is kind of the innovation that's happening.
Yeah.
And how adaptive people are and how amazing that is. Except the problem with the chronic nature of this situation is that people are getting tired.
Yeah.
Of being so resilient and adaptive.
I have a theory about that. And my theory is that the first few months, we actually had a giant adrenaline rush.
100%. Actually, I read an article about that.
Oh, see, I didn't read it or write it. I just thought of it myself. But
I shared an article that talks about this exact same thing on LinkedIn. And it's really fascinating because that's exactly what happened. When you're in this state of crisis, adaptively as humans, we had all the right hormones released in our body to figure out as businesses how to pivot, as humans how to adapt, and a fatigue starts to set in over time. And most people I know kind of were really incredible in the heart of crisis and then hit sort of a crash time. And now people are sort of trying to gear up for the long-term fight that is ahead of us.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a sprint versus a long marathon, and it's a very different mentality. And yeah, we just have to understand that there's going to be different iterations, but we are innovative and we are creative and we are powerful and we do have what it takes. It's just, we have to support ourselves. And I think that's what this all comes down to.
Totally.
Yeah. So, well, I learned so much in this conversation. It was so direct and clear and approachable and relatable. And I love that. That's exactly what I always aim a conversation to be. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Randy. This is such fun.
It is, isn't it? This is why I love cast interviews. It's so
I know. It's like just having a great conversation with somebody who you respect and enjoy. So
exactly. Before we go, Julie, do let us know where we can find you. And, perhaps there's people listening who are going to be like, my company needs Namaste Wellness. So give us a sense of how to follow you and where to make connection.
Absolutely. So our website, which is namasteny.com, is a great place to start. You can also follow us on all the social media channels at Namaste New York. We're really active on Instagram and LinkedIn and Facebook. And you can also purchase my book on Amazon. It's called Inner Wealth: How Wellness Heals, Nurtures, and Optimizes Ultra Successful People. It's good for all levels of success. And it really talks a lot about some of these fundamental ingredients in very approachable, realistic ways in terms of the 4 pillars that you can integrate it into your life.
I love that. I'm definitely going to check it out myself. And yeah, Julie, this was really a joy. And I'm excited to just continue to get to know you over time.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Randy.
Of course. And listeners, thank you for hanging out with me today. I am always so appreciative that your time is spent here and that you're fueling your well, that you're going beyond by being here. I want to remind you to subscribe to this podcast if you haven't yet. And of course, if you're enjoying, give it some 5 stars, some ratings, share it with friends. All of your support truly matters to the growth of this podcast. So until next time, take care of you. Bye.